Think about Passover.
On other occasions, Jesus preferred one interpretation over another. For example, both Matthew, Mark, and Luke teach us that Jesus ate Passover and was then crucified. However, if you read the Gospel of John, it tells us that when Yeshua was crucified, Passover had not yet arrived. According to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Yeshua eats the Passover and then is arrested, judged, and sentenced. According to John, when Yeshua is seized and sentenced, Passover had not yet arrived. How do you resolve this obvious contradiction within the canonical Gospels? If you don't know what Judaism was like in the days of Yeshua, you will never get an answer. Think about the curse of the fig tree. Jesus cursed the fig tree, and the next day it was completely withered. However, the Torah, the law of Moses, in Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 19, prohibits destroying trees. The Torah forbids destroying fruit trees. Even in times of war, Yeshua destroyed a fruit tree. In times of peace, if it's prohibited in times of war, it's even more prohibited in times of peace. However, we do not find any rabbi or leader of Israel criticizing Yeshua for this. Why? If we do not know what Judaism was like in the days of Yeshua, we cannot understand why Yeshua did what he did. Think about the Last Supper. The church has the Holy Supper in the Catholic Church every Sunday and sometimes every day. And in evangelical and Protestant churches, usually the first Sunday of every month. The church has communion with a piece of bread and a little cup of wine or grape juice. All of this supposedly taken from the Master's Last Supper. However, if you go to the Gospels and read them carefully, Yeshua did not drink a single cup. He drank several cups of wine. And he didn't eat a single piece of bread. He ate a lot of bread that night. And between one drink and another, he had a huge feast with lamb and roasted goat, with delicious sweet and sour salads and other dishes. Of course, unleavened bread, and at night, as was the custom.
Now you have
The mural painting of the Last Supper by an extraordinary Christian painter, Leonardo da Vinci from the 15th century. I'm going to ask two guys from the community here to please present that painting. It is a world-class piece of art. The painting of the Last Supper by the extraordinary painter Leonardo da Vinci. I'm going to ask you, please, quickly, take that painting and let's move it so people can see it. Let's take it one at a time, okay? Show it to everyone, okay? Please. It is a spectacular work of art. Look at it closely. Spectacular. If you look at that painting, it has many beautiful things. Mostly, except for the Last Supper. Everything here is anachronistic and out of context. I'll show you some anachronistic elements in that painting. First, the bread on that table has yeast. It's puffed up. Eating leavened bread at the Last Supper is prohibited. That's a big mistake. Second, the order of the apostles is wrong. That was not the way to arrange the guests at the Passover table. Third, the people who are missing. Where are the families? The Passover meal cannot be eaten except with family. Your wife, your children, your siblings, where are they? Where is the mother of Yeshua? Where are his brothers, his sisters, the families, the 120 that appear later in Acts 2? Where are they? They are completely missing. Look at the table. It's anachronistic. They didn't have those tables in days of Yeshua. To eat in the days of Jesus, people didn't sit on chairs like you are now. The tables were barely 20 to 30 centimeters tall. And people would recline on some feather cushions with the feet pointing outwards, not inwards. That is also wrong. And the dinner time, big mistake. Da Vinci, if you look closely, places the Last Supper completely during the day. You can see the blue sun behind. That's a big mistake. The Passover meal is never eaten during the day. It's always at night. In the end, what Leonardo drew has nothing to do with the Passover meal as the master ate it. Thank you, you can put it away. It's a gorgeous painting, yes, undoubtedly majestic, certainly. But the substance and foundation are completely wrong. Why? For ignoring what Judaism was like in the days of Yeshua. Here you have an artistic example of an interpretation of the Gospels that completely ignores its Jewish roots. And the truth about art, about painting, is the result of the truth also in the wrong theology of Yeshua's Judaism. In other words, Da Vinci does not cause an error in Christian theology. It is the wrong Christian theology that leads Da Vinci to make this mistake. Take the case of Michelangelo's Moses. I have a facsimile of Michelangelo's Moses here. Kids, could you help me again, please? Let's open that picture. I'm going to show you a facsimile of this picture here. Who hasn't wondered? Now, who hasn't wondered at some point how Michelangelo made the statue of Moses with two horns coming out of his head, like he was the devil himself? Can you show them this? Walk it around so people can see it. That is an extraordinary artistic piece. But look at how he painted Moses, or how he sculpted Moses, with two horns coming out of his head. Why did this happen? The reason is that when Jerome translated the Bible from Hebrew to Latin, what is written in the Torah is that when Moses came down from the mountain with the two tablets of stone, the people did not know that his face was radiant from having been with God. The Hebrew text says, his face shone. But Jerome confused the root of the Hebrew text and translated it as his face had two horns, or was horned. And despite, even though some warned Michelangelo about this mistake, he continued with the two horns because he couldn't accept that St. Jerome was wrong. The result? A wonderful piece of Christian art. A perfect modeling. Impossible to sculpt in marble by anyone other than him. But a man with horns, instead of the Jewish Moses surrounded by the glory of divine presence. The rest didn't take long to follow. It was a matter of time before popular iconography caricatured Judaism, often with a Jew with a tail and horns, or a Jew like a pig, as if he were a devil. In other words, the idea is sold to the world that the Jew resembles animals and the devil more than human beings. There, you have another artistic example of an interpretation of Scripture that ignores Jewishness from that biblical scenario by a serious translation error. Thank you. Remember, what is true for the art of painting is a result of what is true in the misguided theology of Judaism, of Yeshua, of his Jewish students, and of the Jewish Bible in general. In other words, Michelangelo did not cause an error in Christian theology. It was the Christian theological misinterpretation of a text that led to Michelangelo's mistake. And this is what happens when we forget that Moses was Jewish, that the Bible is an anthology of Jewish books, that Yeshua was Jewish, that he never left Judaism, and that he never created anything like what we now know as Christianity. Now, this didn't just happen with Da Vinci. This didn't only happen with Michelangelo, it happened with others too. And truly, they are not the creators of the problem. They are the symptoms, not the root. They are the effect, not the cause. The root comes from behind. The root comes from the embryonic days of proto-Christianity. In the late first century, until the creature called Christianity was finally born by the church fathers. Namely, St. Ignatius, St. Germas, St. Origen, St. Eusebius, St. Athanasius, St. Basil, St. Gregory, St. John Chrysostom, St. Theodore, St. Cyril, St. John of Damascus, St. Augustine of Hippo, etc. What I'm trying to emphasize is, by separating from its Jewish roots, the church lost its prophetic direction, lost its Hebrew essence, lost its true identity. And now, pretending to be one thing, it does not know it is another. When does this happen? Not overnight, of course. It was a whole power struggle. From battles over who truly has the authentic teachings of Yeshua and the apostles, until finally the Christian sect that prevails. The proto-Christianity that emerges victorious completely disconnects from its Jewish roots and stands as a separate and different tree from the natural olive tree. And by disconnecting from the natural olive tree and planting a different olive tree, wrong interpretations start to arise, which lead to changes, and then more changes and more changes until a completely different religion emerges, divorced from its Hebrew roots. The Christians who came later, including most of our Ibero-American nations, that were born within this interpretation. An identity divorced from its Hebrew roots, they passively receive it in their particular Christian culture in which they are born. They perpetuate it to their children. And that is what we have now. But it was not so at the beginning. That is why most prophetic teachings that come from these changes do not represent the teachings of the Hebrew prophets, nor the teachings of Yeshua, nor the teachings of the apostles or Jewish emissaries of Yeshua, but rather a derailed and confused prophetic platform. They represent the particular interpretation of non-Jewish believers who misinterpreted the words of Yeshua, given in a Jewish setting, full of Jewish concepts. By ignoring them, they didn't necessarily convey their words. Rather, they edited and logically corrupted their teaching. And with corrupt teachings, the prophecy is also corrupted. Many of the New Testament manuscripts we now have show edits, additions, subtractions, and later interpretations made in the name of the apostles to justify their divorce from its Hebrew roots, when in reality the apostles neither wrote nor taught that. Already by Apostle Paul's days, there were some Christian leaders who, in their eagerness to establish their own house, would write letters as if they were from Paul or any other apostle, including Yeshua himself. Not to convey the Jewish ideas of the apostles or Paul, but their own Hellenistic ideas and Roman interpretations. They wrote and taught them as if they were from an apostle only to gain authority. And they imposed their point of view on people who had no points of reference to decide, because they were not Jews, whether those teachings came from the apostles or not. When Paul, for example, writes to the Thessalonians in his second letter and tells them, "Do not be easily shaken from your way of thinking, nor be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter," as if it were from us. Not by letter either, as if it were our own, revealed, like in their own days, the manipulation and corruption of the teachings of Yeshua and the apostles, and of the apostle Paul himself was present. Think, for example, of the letter to the Galatians. At the end of it, the apostle Paul adds a personal note in his own handwriting, as we say today, so that his recipients would know that he was the author of that letter, that he was responsible for that letter, for the teaching in that letter. And in that way, those who received the letter had the confidence and certainty that it came from the Apostle Paul. Why did Paul have to do this? Logically, because false letters and false teachings in his name were circulating. Not only Paul's letters, but also those of the other apostles. Think, for example, about 1 John chapter 5, verses 7 and 8. To the letter attributed to the Apostle John. They added this verse. 3 are those who bear witness in heaven, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Such a thing was never taught by the apostles. What else did they do? They put words in the mouth of Yeshua. Ideas and principles that Yeshua never said or taught. Because evidently they are contrary to Judaism. For example, a later Christian scribe's edition, when Yeshua said, "It is not what enters the mouth. It is not what goes into a man that defiles him, but what comes out of his mouth that defiles him." A Christian scribe later added a parenthesis saying, "This making all foods clean."
This is a later interpretation